With Christmas this week and 2020 coming to an end, this may be your last chance to actually put a computer together before the holidays. I'm going to tell you some of the best deals that I found on hardware that I actually have used myself. That way you know that you're getting something good. Let's get started. Hey guys, Tiago here with Classical Technology. Remember to subscribe if you like content like this, and of course smash that like button, makes me happy. So let's talk about some PC gaming deals. Now, right off the bat, GPUs and CPUs are actually going to be very difficult to talk about because, as you guys know, GPUs are really non-existent. Even the used market is absolutely terrible right now. Like 1080 Ti's seem to be selling for over $400. If you guys remember when the 3070 was announced, we made a joke that people were going to be selling their 2080 Ti for $500 on eBay. Well, that kind of ended up not really happening because the GPUs really were not available, especially like the 3070, 3080, 3090, not to mention the AMD GPUs. So while theoretically, of course, people would have sold their 2080 Ti's to get a 3070 or 3080, it really didn't end up working like that because basically stock was extremely limited. So now we're stuck in a market with basically no GPUs, and the CPUs have definitely been a little bit bonkers as well, primarily because of AMD. Ryzen 5000 CPUs have been sold out for a pretty decent while. Once in a while they're going to restock, but what that has also caused is Ryzen 3000 to not only be sold out in a lot of cases, when it is available, the price has definitely jumped up, so you're not really getting that great a deal there. Basically, your only option if you want something that's a good value at this point for a CPU, as funny as it is to say, is going to be Intel. Intel actually has more things in stock, and you can actually pick up some of their CPUs for not too bad of price, which is actually really funny saying because all these years people were mad at Intel because they couldn't produce things that were affordable, and that's why AMD became so popular. But now we're kind of stuck with this conundrum. So first, let's talk about a few items that I have actually been working with and that I can easily recommend to you guys. That's going to be with some computer cases. First, I've really been working on Mini-itx recently, primarily two cases. First, the Cooler Master NR200. There's also the P version. Basically, the difference between this, now this is going to be about 18 liters in terms of the size. The difference between the NR200, which is a little bit cheaper, and the NR200P, which is about $99, you're going to get not only the mesh side panel, but you're also going to get a glass side panel, not to mention a PCIe riser for you to be able to use a vertical GPU. Just keep in mind, if you're using B550 or X570, make sure in your BIOS and PCIe to set generation 3 instead of auto or generation 4, because this riser is not a PCIe generation 4 riser that comes with this particular case. So you may not be able to boot if you connect your GPU to it without having it specifically say generation 3. Just something that you guys should know about. A lot of these PCIe risers have been having problems with X570, basically won't boot at all unless it's a specific PCIe generation 4 riser cable, or on your motherboard settings you set it to generation 3. And between these two cases, if you can spring for the P version, I would say you do that because you're going to get an extra fan as well as the ability to put a tempered glass. Now, I've been testing a build with the Cooler Master NR200P with the tempered glass and the vertical GPU, and at first I kind of thought the thermals were going to be terrible, but it's actually not that bad. If you have like fans on the bottom, you have the fans on top for a total of 4 fans. The vertical GPU is a little bit warmer than if you just had it laying on horizontally on the bottom with fans going towards it, but it actually performs fairly decently, and you get the added bonus of being able to visually see your GPU while maintaining a pretty good performance level. So if you guys can spring for the P version, you can still use the mesh panel if you'd like. It just gives you a little more options if you want to vertically mount your GPU, and for an extra 20 bucks, I think it's pretty much a fair price. Now, another case that I've actually been using as well, and there are a few spots where it does have a few advantages over the Cooler Master case, that's going to be the Silverstone SG14. Now, this case is going to be slightly more expensive. It's a little bit over $100, and you don't get a tempered glass panel or anything like that. But one thing that you do get that actually makes a big difference, it can take natively ATX power supplies. That's something that after building in Mini-itx, you see how expensive these little power supplies are. I know a lot of people use the Corsair, like the SF600, SF750. If you're doing a build that has RTX 3080s and a powerful CPU in Mini-itx, you're gonna need something that's really beefy, and it's a lot easier to find a cheaper 850 watt or even a 750 watt power supply if it's going to be a larger ATX, and this Silverstone case actually takes that. And otherwise, I thought that the cooling was really phenomenal in this case. I was able to even fit an RTX 3090 with a Noctua dual tower cooler, so this case definitely has some advantages. It's more minimalistic and understated. The Cooler Master, of course, with the glass panel does look a little bit better, but the fact that you can actually fit a standard ATX power supply, you can save a lot of money getting an ATX power supply itself versus getting something that's small form factor. I'm also going to link a few of the small form factor power supplies that I've been using below. Of course, you have the Corsair, the SF600 is probably the most popular, but I'd be careful pairing a 3080 and above with that. While I did try a 3080 with a 600 watt power supply, and of course it does work, you're technically within the wattage, the fans definitely might spin up more and you're just putting your system under more stress. So if you're doing 3080 and above, I definitely recommend at least a 750 watt power supply. The Corsair one that everybody likes is just really sold out and very expensive. Another alternative that I found, Silverstone actually makes an SFF power supply, but it's an L version, meaning it's longer, but it's 800 watts and it's also titanium rated. I actually picked up one of these the other day in order to use in the Lian Dynamic mini build. That case, if you guys have seen, does not take an ATX power supply. It's either going to be just a small form factor power supply or the L version. So for that build, I definitely want to put some beefy components. So 800 watts at titanium is certainly pretty impressive. I'm going to try this power supply out and let you guys know how it is as well. And coming in at around $214, it's a pretty fair price, I think, for a small 800 watt power supply that's also titanium rated, and it does seem to currently be in stock, so if you can fit in the L version of these small power supplies, certainly can be something great to consider. And in terms of larger cases, of course I mentioned I'm going to be doing a build in the mini version of the Lian Dynamic, but the XL version as well as the regular version are all as highly recommended, even though they're kind of played out a little bit because so many people do builds in them. That's for a pretty good reason. They can fit so much hardware. They're very flexible in the type of stuff you can put in there. You can do an air-cooled system. You can do water cooling. They look great. They're actually a lot of fun to build in as well as upgrade in the future. So these are cases that I can always easily recommend. Even though a lot of people do builds in them, it's something that when you do your own build in it, I think you'll appreciate how it's laid out. And another case that I've been using is actually this one right behind me here. Recently came out. It's the Be Quiet 802. Now, the biggest advantage of this case, first of all, it's a pretty big case, so that has to be for a little bit larger build. The airflow is really fantastic because it comes with a front mesh panel. Be Quiet typically will have more restricted panels in order to have a more silent case, but here you have the option of doing that or having more airflow with a mesh panel, which I kind of personally prefer. I think having more airflow, I can actually keep the noise and acoustics down to a pretty good level, and I really love the look of it with the little side feet on the side, the stand, and it's an absolute pleasure to build in as well. It may be a little harder to find stock at this point of this case, but if you can find it and you need a case that's larger like this to fit a lot of hardware with good airflow, I certainly recommend it. It's a little bit different style and a little bit more unique than the typical like fractal design cases. I really like those as well. You know, the Meshify S2, the Define 7. I've done builds in those, but after a while, their design is a little bit stagnant. They all kind of look the same. The Be Quiet case definitely has a much different aesthetic. I love like the angled lines and everything that it's designed, and you could even do like a vertical motherboard layout. It has a lot of unique little elements. We won't talk too much about CPUs just because I mentioned before they seem to be pretty much sold out. You can still find a 3700X and maybe some of the Intel like the 10850K, 10900K. You can still find those for a decent price. So if you can't find a Ryzen 5000, it might be a good idea to even get an Intel for now, because at least like a 10850K or a 10700K, you're not going to be overpaying for it. It's going to be in stock, and you're not going to bottleneck whatever GPU that you have, and it's going to be pretty good for gaming for quite a while, even though AMD, of course, makes better processors now with Ryzen 5000, but they're not really readily available. So either you get a previous generation like 3700X or even a 3600. The problem is they're going to be a little more expensive now than normal because of the stock shortages, so you may actually have a little bit easier time going with Intel. And in terms of cooling your CPU, I'm going to talk about a few different AIO coolers that I've used GPUs recently. First is going to be the EK AIO. Now this comes in 120, 240, and 360 millimeter versions. That's actually what I have right back here, cooling an 18-core processor and doing it very well. The installation was a breeze. Temperatures are amazing. Even Gamers Nexus did, a review on this, and it was one of the top performing AIOs. So I really like it. You get some great fans with it, and it's actually priced pretty well. It's actually priced a little bit cheaper than even the Corsair, like the 150i, the Capellix Elite. While that one is also really cool, the performance is great. It's certainly considerably more expensive at around like $189. Sometimes you can find it for sale, like maybe $169, but I would definitely take the EK one over that unless you're doing like a Corsair themed build. And of course, the NZXT Kraken line of coolers, especially the newer ones, have been using the 240 millimeter in one of these small form factor cases in the Cooler Master case, and that actually performs tremendously well. They're not the cheapest, but the performance is certainly up there. If you want to save a little more money, the Be Quiet Pure Loop coolers are really good as well. I tested it in this case. They're very quiet aesthetically. There's no RGB, that's why they're a little bit cheaper, but you do get some great Be Quiet fans with them, and they come in 360, 240, 140 millimeter versions, so that way you can fit whatever case and cooling setup that you need. And lastly, some motherboards. If you're looking for a Mini-itx motherboard, I actually really like the Asus B550, the Strix I. Now, I looked at this versus the X570, and you're not really getting a tremendous difference here. You still get PCIe Generation 4 on B550 on one of the lanes if you want to do, an SSD or something like that, but it's not a huge difference because Mini-itx, you really can't fill up all the slots anyway, and the cooling may be a little bit better with the VRMs on the X570, but the B550 certainly isn't that terrible, and unless you're doing like a 5950X or something like that, or a high-end CPU, I think you should be more than fine, and it seems to be a little bit more available and around $20 cheaper than the X570 version as well. And if you want a larger motherboard as well, the Asus Strix B550F coming in at under $200 is also a pretty good value. These Asus boards are usually well built, they have a good amount of features, as well as aesthetically looking really good. So I'm going to link these down below, and they are Amazon affiliate links, and I'm also going to link some other items that I didn't have time to talk about in the video that I've used before, but you still have a chance to put a system together, even though the GPU and CPU are going to be a little bit challenging. If you happen to have those components already and you're looking for some of this hardware, can definitely still be a great time to get it done. Alright guys, so thank you very much for watching. Remember to subscribe, smash that like button, and I'll see you guys on the next video.